Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar tonight on rugging, the pros, cons, whys and wherefores. So before I get started, I've had to use a different microphone tonight, so I'm hoping everyone is not having trouble hearing me. So if everyone can just type if they can hear me, that would be wonderful. Let me just open that tab. My computer doesn't want to play the game. Okay, I'll just see. Yes, everyone can hear. I've got Marilyn. Yes, I've got Dave. Beautiful. Got Sharon. Beautiful. Okay. So thank you all for joining me for our last webinar for a very short time. I am reluctantly having to hang up my boots for a little bit and get a little bit organised. So I thought we'd do a bit of a light subject for the last one. So, and it was one of the, I can't remember whose choice it was, but anyway, I asked the question and we wanted to cover rugging. So, I'm very much a believer of less is best with horses. And so I thought I'd start off with, the point of rugging. Why do we rug horses? So just going through the pros and cons. So a lot of people love rugging because, well, everyone else is doing it, so why not? They think that it keeps their horse warm, keeps the coat nice, prevents winter coat coming through, and it also prevents bleaching. So they're definitely, positives for rugging. And it's also great, time spent with your horse, rugging and unrugging them, especially young horses. It can be beneficial being around them and having that, that interaction. And a really big pro for rugging is it stops insects biting your horse. So if you have a horse that's sensitive to insect bites, it's certainly perfect for that. But on the other side of the equation, the cons of rugging, and I think this is why what we see a lot of is people just don't get the idea that, you can overheat your horse, you can cook your horse with rugs, and it's a common occurrence. A lot of people like to rug a horse to hide things on their horse, i.e. wounds or body condition. The amount of aged horses we go to, and people put the rug on thinking that you won't notice the pin, the hip bones pointing out and sticking out. So I think injuries and things like that can be missed if people just rely on rugs and they don't unrug their horse. So the other problem with rugging is the cost. So if you have a horse that's very hard on rugs, you've got to be constantly paying for rugs to be fixed. And also rain scald is a really big negative for rugging, inappropriate rugging. So overheating your horse can lead to rain scald and other skin conditions that if you're not taking the rugs off daily, if you just throw a rug on in the beginning of winter and leave it there the whole time, a lot can happen under a rug that you haven't noticed. So in Queensland also, the cons for rugging is our temperature changes so much throughout the day. So, unless you're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to remove heavy doona rugs, in Queensland it is, you can't leave the same rug on for the whole day. And, for warmth, if you're wanting to warm your horse up in Queensland, it involves layers and taking those layers off very quickly. So, it's depending on your climate, it can be a negative wanting to rug your horse. So the first one is, keeping your horse warm. I think this is where a lot of people put their own, their own beliefs or their own temperature controls on their horses. I know in the office here, I have I don't feel the cold, where we had a day the other day that was 22 degrees and Shelley was rugged up, had a jumper on and really felt the cold. And horses are exactly the same. So horses have a natural ability to keep themselves warm. So that's what their winter coat is for. They have, a coat that they can get the hairs erect so that they trap in heat and it works as a heater as well. So, horses have evolved, we've softened them a lot, but if you're doing things like clipping a horse, then yes, I agree that you need to rug your horse. You've taken away that natural ability for them to thermoregulate. So you've taken away their coat. So they need to be rugged. And aged horses as well, when they start to, their metabolism slows down, they often can't create enough energy to warm themselves enough. And when I say, this, I'm talking more in Queensland, definitely only the night. Our days really don't get cold enough. Everyone in the, southern states, definitely. I remember going to, I worked in England for a while, and we'd be trudging through snow to pre-test horses, and they weren't rugged. They had adapted and they acclimatised to the weather. So I think we put a lot of our own expectations and things on the horses, and that's often where we go wrong. But aged horses definitely can't thermoregulate as well, or they burn too much energy, I suppose, to keep themselves warm. So I definitely believe older horses should be rugged. And also young horses, and when I say young horses, under sort of, that 2 years of age, they're just learning to adapt and acclimatise and things like that. So young horses, and it's also a great, learning tool with young horses to have something on them and be handled, and, taking things off and on. I think that's a great desensitisation. Sick horses, again, I believe sick horses should be rugged in the colder months, especially if you're living down south. Because when a horse has to keep themselves warm, they do burn a lot of energy trying to keep their core temperature at a stable temperature. So, sick horses can benefit from having, light to medium rugs on them, so they're not exerting energy to stay warm. And also, if your property has, if you're on the top of a hill and it's very windy, and that there's no shelter for the animals to get out of the cold, that's certainly an area that you need to consider rugging your horse. And also wet weather. Again, Queensland, we don't have a great deal of that. But if you are constantly, if your horse is constantly in wet weather, giving them that ability to, to stay a little bit dry, because again, with the horse, they are able to erect their hairs when they're cold, a bit like us getting goosebumps, but their whole coat gets goosebumps, and they allows them to trap in hot air when they evaporate, when they sweat and things like that, or just the body temperature allows hot air, and it's a bit like a doona. When you've got windy weather, that blows the coat, and it stops the coat from being able to do that. And it also, in wet weather, it allows the hairs to, the weight of the rain and things like that won't allow that hair to erect and stand up. So wet weather horses can get quite cold if it's a long duration of wet weather, because they just don't have that natural ability to thermoregulate. So, these are the conditions that I believe that you should be rugging your horses, or thinking about rugging your horses if they've got any of these problems. Oops, let me just. Okay. So, the show people out there are adamant that they, must rug their horse, and they must sweat their horses. I love, clients telling me that they need to put the doona and wool rugs on to sweat their horses. And if you're allowing your horse enough exercise during the day and, only supplying the energy that they need, I just don't understand this whole sweating and, causing the horse to overheat. It leads to dehydration, kidney problems. There's just a whole gamut of medical conditions that sweating your horse can cause. So I just think a good exercise and diet, you don't need to be, trying any of these other modalities to try and get your horse fit. The big one with the show, show people, the hack people and dressage, they like to rug their horses to prevent the winter coat. But you also need to have your horse under light. So your horse doesn't just go, oh, it's starting to get cold, I'll grow my winter coat now. They actually start growing their winter coat in about February, March in Australia, and it's due to day shortening. So it's got nothing to do with the temperature. It is to do with the length of the day. As the day starts to shorten, the melatonin starts to upregulate the hair growth. So just putting a rug on your horse is not going to prevent a winter coat. You also need to allow, the horses to be stabled under lights in the afternoons to mimic the day length, not shortening. So it's a bit of a misnomer that rugging your horse will prevent a winter coat. Your horse will still get a winter coat, and yes, the rug helps with the winter coat because it also seems to rub off on the rug. but it won't prevent your horse growing a winter coat just rugging it. So you need to consider the day length and the other processes going on as to the indicators for your horse to start growing a coat. And putting a coat on a horse, a rug on a horse, you just go and wash them, prep them for the show. I totally believe you need to put a rug on that horse, because you put it in a stable and the first thing it wants to do is go and roll, or put it back in its paddock and it finds the nearest mud spot. So definitely believe that rugs will keep a horse clean. So they're a great magnet for dirt when they do that. So totally believe that keeping a coat nice with a rug is the main reason is you've just washed them and you want to keep them clean for 24 hours. But yeah, preventing that winter coat, you just have to be careful of. And coats and winter rugging them is also a natural grooming. When they're walking around and things like that, the rug can certainly help with that, and keep the oils in the coat, which is how it can keep a nice coat. But it certainly won't prevent a winter coat just by rugging. So if you're going to rug, so you're fitting into those, those few categories that I believe you need to rug for. The first step with, choosing a rug is you've got to make sure it fits properly. So the main area that you can tell when a rug doesn't fit properly is those shoulders and the brisket, the breast area. They get these, typical rug rubs, and it's indicating that it does not fit your horse correctly. Some people get caught, they get online and they're buying European size rugs and not the UK or US size or Australian size. So we measure from basically the front of the breast area to the back of the horse, where the Europeans always have to do it differently. They go from the wither to the tail. And things you have to consider is, your conformation of your horse. If you've got a deep-bodied horse, you need to make sure that the length of the rug not only fits, but also the depth. There's a lot of rugs out there that are a lot deeper than certain ones, so you need to be making sure. Or if you have a wider necked horse, sometimes you have to get them that the gussets and things are a lot deeper. And sometimes you have to get them, fitted to your horse, because not, as you well know with humans, not everyone's the same. A size 12 isn't a size 12. It fits you in certain places and then other places it doesn't. And horses are exactly the same. So if you have a deep, a thick-necked horse, then you need to, consider getting silks or something like that to prevent rubbing, or have the rug fitted, putting darts and things like that in to fit your horse. And there's no point having a big warm blood and having a narrow-chested rug and half his belly's hanging out, which we see a bit. So you have to allow for the depth of the rug as well as the length. So step 2 is the correct choice. So once you've measured your horse and you know what size you're going to need, this is the area that I suppose I could talk about for hours and hours and hours. And there's so many rugs out there. I got on Google earlier and just thought I'll just double check, and I think I lost count at about 190 rug types that everyone spruiks their own little things. So I thought I'd break it down into whether you're trying to keep your horse covered in the so you want to keep in the warmer weather, or whether you are trying to keep them warm in the cooler weather. So for the warmer weather, this is, I suppose, Queensland winter days and things like that, or interstate. If you're only really wanting a bit of coverage to prevent coat fading and things like that, the main things, there's a few that you can choose from. The first one's like a fly sheet or a fly mesh rug. They're the sort of the basic starter, I suppose, that you can go for, and that's they're a mesh rug which offers protection from basically the harsh sun and insects. They allow a breeze to pass through them, so that that's you're not going to overheat your horse. Keep the flies and insects away, but they are really useless. You know, they won't keep your horse dry because if it's raining, there's certainly holes all the way through them. And the mesh can be very different from rug to rug. So you can get lightweight, brittle, and stiff fabric to something that resembles shade cloth, which are fantastic. So they certainly have great air. They're the best rugs for airflow. So if you have a horse that their core temperature, they don't feel the or they do feel the heat, you can often put one of these rugs on and it almost cools the horse because it allows the breeze to get through and they won't overheat. So and it alleviates the horse from itching. If they're an itchy horse, it has that ability. They dry out quickly though, so after a shower of rain, they're not going to heat the horse up and cause rain scald because the horse will be able to dry out in these rugs. So that's a great plus. And they're a coarser fabric, so they can also help groom the horse a little bit better. And then maybe not good on horses that have that sensitive fine coats. They can be a little bit harsh sometimes. So you have to bear that in mind if your horse is one of those thin-skinned, dainty little things. Sometimes the fly sheets are a little bit harsh. And so that's the sort of the starting level of a summer rug. And then you get the polycotton, ripstop summer sheets, the paddock rugs. And they're generally a cotton or polyester blend rug, and they often incorporate ripstop. And when they say ripstop, nothing is horseproof, so you will find a horse that will rip it quick smart. So I don't really know why they call it ripstop, because I don't think I've met a horse that won't rip it on a fence or something. So. But they're a general all-purpose rug that keeps the sun off, so it helps with the coat fading, and it also prevents the flies from landing and things like that, the insects. So they're lightweight, so it gives your horse some insulation in cool nights, but they're not waterproof. They can dry out. They dry out fairly quickly, but they're good for year round, but you just have to make sure that your horse, your horse doesn't sweat. It's not one of those horses that has a higher temperature and doesn't need to be rugged. So so that's the ripstop rugs. Then you can get hybrid rugs. Now, hybrid just refers to a rug that uses the two different fabric types. So most popular is a polycotton ripstop with mesh in the necklines and skirting and things like that. So that it sort of offers the best of both worlds. It's got insect protection, high airflow, and it's easier on the delicate horses. So you can get hybrid rugs. And then you can get flag rugs. They're a lightweight, open weave sort of cotton rug. It's a bit like cheesecloth, and they're really cool and ideal in really hot climates. But I find that they're not strong, and they are really for the princess horse that likes a rug on them. And some horses do; they love to be rugged. They look as though they're going in their party gear and things like that. So certainly the flag rugs are not for horses that are a bit harsh on their rugs. It's for the princesses that that like to prance around. So so they're the ones. They're the sort of the most common types of warmer weather rugs. You've got your fly sheet or your mesh rugs, your polycotton ripstops, hybrid rugs, and your flag rugs. So that's they're the the summer month rugs. Or if your horse is itchy, you can leave the fly sheets and those things on them all year round to prevent the insects. And there's also bodysuits that are coming out now that have big belly. They cover the horse basically from head to toe, and they're usually a lycra, so they breathe quite well. Difficult to get onto your horse sometimes, and if your horse is tough on rugs, it's not appropriate for them, and they're quite expensive. But you can get quite a lot of bodysuits and things like that now. And obviously, if you are rugging them for the insect component, you need to have the neck rug and the tail bag, everything covered in them. So that's rugs for the warmer weather. So cooler or wet weather, it's really becoming a bit of a fashion thing now. You know, you can't wear last season's rugs, and you know it's crazy how many designs and things like that there are out there now. So I'll just go through the different sort of rugs that you can get for your horse for the winter months, seeing they're sort of knocking on our door at the moment. So your first one is sort of your wool rugs. They're ideal under rugs, or you know if you're stabling your horse, great for the stable. It's a natural fibre and very breathable, and it also provides good insulation. So it's stronger than your polar fleece and will last longer. Very hefty price tag though. And you've just got to make sure that you are buying a wool rug and not a a blend. It needs to have at least 70% wool in it for it to be classed as a wool rug. So just check how much percentage of wool is in your rug. So polar fleece. So that's the wool rug, which is sort of your, I suppose not your entry level but it's the best I suppose for your horse for warmth. But really only if they're indoors and stabled. So the most common one, I suppose, is your sort of your polar fleece horse rugs, and they're really popular as an under rug or a travel rug in the cooler months. It doesn't have the same strength as the wool, but is you're not having to pay as much, which is quite handy. And you just have to make sure you don't get the anti-pilling ones. You can buy cheap ones, and they're just like those cheap blankets, and they get all balls and everything under them, in them, and they're just they don't last. So you've just got to, and so the GSM is really important in these ones. So the higher the GSM, the better for the polar fleece horse rug. So then you can get the synthetic waterproof denier turnout rugs, and these are the ones that are, pretty out there. You can get some pretty amazing designs in them, and so these are really only for your cold or wet weather, and they're a great turnout rug. Generally, the synthetic rugs are most suitable because they're light and they're 100% waterproof, and they dry out easily because they're so light. The downside is you need to remove these when the weather clears, or during the day when it starts to warm up, and you can overheat a horse really quickly in these things, or the humidity goes up. So if it's hot and sunny or the humidity goes up, they're sort of yet to invent a waterproof and cool rug at the same time. So that's the problem you have, especially in Queensland, is they're not breathable. The modern ones often allow the type of rug to be breathable, but it's also not providing weather protection. So you have to be really careful with them. So with the synthetic rugs, there's quite a few different types. So you have to make sure you're getting the right ones. So they've sort of got four types of the synthetic rugs. So you've got your turnout rugs, which are light with no fill, and they're often called unlined rain sheets, and they you've got to have something underneath them that can often be quite harsh on the horse. So but then you're stopping the breathability of the rug. So the synthetic turnout, so you've got light, then you've got like a polar fleece line, and these are an ideal choice. In they've got a little more warmth than just a rain sheet, but they don't make them too warm. And then the medium fill synthetic turnouts, they're about the 200 grams above, and they're sort of the ideal for areas that experience warmer Australian winters. And they don't overheat the horse, but you've still got to remove them in Queensland. It's just too hot for a lot of these synthetic turnout rugs. And then you've got a heavy fill, which is for basically the alpine areas. So they are a lot heavier. They're sort of that 200 gram rug, 200 to 300. and they are, like loomers. So they're the, you've got your light, your polar fleece lines, your medium, and your heavy fill for your synthetic turnout rugs. It's interesting when, you're checking your horse to see if you are trying to overheat them or you've got them warm enough. You need to check in several spots. So you need to, put your hand up right up underneath around the shoulders and the neck and the flanks to really get a good indication of how your horse is coping with the rugs and things like that. So it's not just a case of putting your arm under and going, oh, that's nice and toasty. You need to be able to feel their body temperature and know, whether it is doing its job, so it's keeping them warm enough without overheating them, or whether they're actually quite cold in it. And you can tell if they sort of don't want to move around when they're cold. They sort of stand in the one spot and they can shiver. And when they're hot, you can see them. They're a lather of sweat underneath their rugs, and you can feel them sweating. So it's great to pop your hand in and see what's going on underneath there. On a cold night when we're doing a colic, we often want to jump in with the horse. So yes, it can be quite nice. And then another type of rug that you can use is just your good old canvas rugs, and I think these have been around since Jesus was a child. And I mean, they're a lot older, now. They're usually quite, they've got good breathability, but they're usually quite heavy, but they're strong. Like you get those polyester things and the synthetic rugs, and my horse just has to look at it and it rips. Where your canvas rugs are a lot hardier, but they're also they're really heavy when they're wet, and they're not great. They're rain resistant, but they start to absorb water after a few hours of heavy rain, and they're not suited to high rainfall areas. So they're good for and they're really quite cheap. So although the synthetic rugs nowadays are flooding the market, and they're quite cheap. So so they're sort of the classifications of rugs that you can get, or what they can be made out of. And I mean, you can get neck rugs that you've got lycra neck rugs, and then you can put your rugs over the top. I certainly believe in layering for rugging, because you can, but only if you can peel off the layers. I don't think any horse in Australia needs three layers of rugs. If you have them fitted correctly, it really doesn't get that cold in Australia, because most horses are, it's different if your horse is out in the paddock, but most people pull their horses in at night and put 5 layers on, and you've taken them out of the extremes. You've got them in stables which are usually protected, and then B, you're confining them and things like that. So horses have the natural ability to go and warm themselves up if they need to, but if you're confining them, you are taking them out of the elements, so you don't need to put another 5 layers on just because they're in the stable. So I think that's really important with rugging, is don't overdo it, and remember what you're rugging them for. If it is to keep them warm, then are you wanting not wanting a winter coat and all of those sorts of things. So and when you are looking for a winter rug, what's the best materials? Most turnout rugs have an outer shell of nylon, polyester, or polypropylene, and your stable rugs are often made of cotton blends or polar fleece. So you can get waterproof deniers. The strength of the rug's outer layer is expressed in terms of its denier, and this is it's a unit of measurement for the thickness of the thread used. So the higher the denier number, the stronger the material. So if you're comparing a 600 denier and a 1200 denier rug, both will provide similar warmth and insulation. However, the 1200 will be stronger. So if you have a horse that likes to, rub up on the fences with his rug, then you're better off going after the 1200 denier, because the fibres are, thicker. So, so that's, the denier, what you're looking at when you're reading that. So, and you can often, there's often a lot of linings and things like that you can choose from. And you want, something that's breathable and your horse isn't going to sweat and you know, and cause rain scald and other problems. So yeah, so that's all the sort of the things to think about. And you know, the canvas rugs are great because they are a bit hardier, but they're not 100% waterproof. They are water resistant. But you know, after a long amount of rain, it'll enter through the stitching, and you know, you can see horses having a rug on a horse in rain that's not waterproof actually causes your horse to be colder than it just being in the rain itself. So you know, they've got this wet, soggy, sodden thing on top of them, and it's preventing their hairs from being able to stand up and keep warm. So rugging a horse that's in the wet, that the rug isn't waterproof, you're better off taking it off and keeping them, just leaving them in the rain. So that's another thing to consider with rugging. Let me just get that. So, you know, things just to go back over the things, you know, are you choosing the right rug? Just always remember, why are you rugging? If it's for health issues, or, you know, if you are wanting a nice coat, just remember you've still got to have that daylight, and you don't want to overheat your horse. So you need to, you know, think about what your horse's coat slash, you know, skin is like. Some horses have a really fine coat with less hairs. They can be, you know, if they have got some autoimmune problem, their coat can be even thinned out. So, you know, they need a bit of extra protection. You see those horses that you can, you know, their coat is just thick all the time. They don't need as much rugging as you know, many other horses. And you know, what's your horse's health and age, and all of those things come into play. And what is your property like? If you are on the top of a hill, or you know, in a windy valley, and you have no trees, there's no protection, then you know, and are you concerned about your horse? We have a black horse here, and she turns into a buckskin in summer. She just sort of bleaches out. So is that important to you, or don't you care? You know, if you're not caring whether the horse's coat is bleaching in summer, you don't care. She's a recipient mare. She could be purple with pink polka dots for all I care. You know, then rugging her is not to stop the coat fading is not an issue for me. You know, you've got to, people put rugs on and leave them on, which is the worst thing. We'll come along and go, well, how long has this horse had rain scald for? And half its back's peeling off because the clients haven't taken the rug off, you know, for a good month. Horses can lose a lot of weight. They can sweat and lose a lot of weight under a rug. So if you are rugging, make sure you're taking that rug, you know, off and on, replacing it with a fresh one, you know, at least once a week, or just visualising your horse, you know, getting a bit of sun on their back, visualising your horse at least once a week, to make sure that, you know, nothing sinister is happening under that rug. And what's your climate like? You know, some places, you know, might get, you know, 4 days of warm weather a year, and then other places, you know, here in Queensland, we had a cold spell last week, and you know, I started seeing people throwing out the doona rugs, and it wasn't that cold. Interestingly, a horse, if you're moving a horse from climate to climate, they take 10 to 20 days to climatise to a new area. So, you know, if you buy a horse from Queensland and you're moving it to Tasmania, then I potentially would send a rug with it, or, you know, get it rugged down at the other end. But in saying that, if you have bought a horse from Victoria and you live in Queensland, and you know, they've sent it with their nice doona rugs, I don't think that horse needs those rugs on. So you just have to be mindful of, you know, just because we you know, we feel the cold, it doesn't necessarily mean that your horse will. If you confine your horse at night, then you're preventing them, you know, in the winter months, if you're confining them, you're preventing them from being able to keep warm, exercising, moving around. So, you know, you have to bear that in mind. I did, when I was doing a bit of research for this, I did find it hysterically funny. One company was sprouting that you'll save hundreds of dollars in your feed bill in winter if you rug your horse, because you don't have to feed your horse as much to keep them warm. And I mean, we don't get cold here in Queensland, so it was extremely hysterical for me to read that because, you know, yes, you increase, you know, you probably add a bit of oil in probably for a month in Queensland, but I can't imagine rugging your horse all winter would save you hundreds of dollars. It'd probably cost you hundreds of dollars by the time you fix rugs and things like that. But yeah, it was a bit of a long bow to draw, saying that you'd save hundreds of dollars in your feed bill. So, you know, a cup of oil a day doesn't add up to that, even if you get winter for 8 months of the year. Is, you know, certainly was an interesting take on it. So yes, your horse burns more energy trying to keep warm, but it certainly doesn't burn through that much feed. So yeah, that was certainly an interesting point for people to buy rugs. So yeah, so they're the things to think about. You know, sit down and go, right, pros and cons. Why am I rugging my horse? Is it aged? Is it young? Is it sick? Has it got a clipped coat? Do I want to prevent the winter coat from coming through? If that's the case, I need to add daylight, you know, light as well in the stables. Or is my horse itchy? Then rugging all year round is one of the biggest you know, the biggest pluses for itchy horses is to stop the insects landing. And then, you know, what's your horse's coat like, or what's your horse's core temperature? You know, do they sweat looking at work, or, you know, can you work them for an hour or two and, you know, they only just start to break a sweat? You know, horses run cooler and hotter. Some horses have a higher basal temperature than others. And getting to know your horse, you know, does your horse feel the cold? Do you find it sort of, you know, shivering in the corner, the first sign of cold weather, or do you not notice a difference at all? You know, they have a great ability to react and let you know. And I suppose also the type of breed of horse you have. You know, if you have a heavy set horse, then, you know, they're often they can acclimatise a lot better than a, you know, soft thoroughbred that we've sort of we've made quite soft over the years. So have a look at your horse and their temperament as well, and have a look at your property and also your local climate. So you know, they're the most important things to think about. So does anyone have any questions about rugging and things like that? So I didn't cover the bodysuits and things like that. They haven't really taken off a great deal. And another thing I didn't cover were the amount of rugs out there now for itchy horses. They have rugs that are sort of dipped in a pesticide. Yeah, and look, I haven't had a great deal of people tell me that they're amazing. You know, I've had very hit and miss. Some swear by them and then others don't. So it's probably 50-50. 50% of people think they're amazing, and then 50% sort of neither here nor there. So, you know, hasn't worked on their horse. So I always say the person who comes up with a cure for Queensland itch is going to be a very, very, very rich person. So interestingly or excitingly, there's a few products in the pipeline at the moment, and they are you know, they're hoping to get them out on the market very soon. So that will be very exciting if the products do, if they do come through with the goods. So that's a bit exciting. So I will just check the questions. So we have a question. Apart from sweating, do horses also need energy to cool themselves, therefore causing more sweating? So they don't really need more energy for cooling. Like they use all of their thermoregulation. So you know, sweating is the main thing that they do, and it causes, you know, they vasodilate their blood vessels to allow heat, and that's what the sweating is. So they don't really use you know, they use a lot more energy to warm up than cool down, I suppose. So sweating is just sort of a process that happens. I suppose, you know, if a horse is trying to keep warm, they shiver and things like that, but the energy release for sweating is a lot less than shivering and trying to keep warm. They have a lot of processes that sort of happen automatically when they're hot, so they don't really burn more energy, no. A good question. So I will just having issues trying to get this silly screen bit open. So yes, we have here. So okay, so so Deborah missed the beginning, so don't know if you covered this, but our little mini is 31 years old. Wow, that's crazy. Very good, Deborah. Has a very thick coat in winter. We often put 2 coats on her in winter, one being a fleece and the other a winter combo. Is this too much? So I don't know, Deborah, if you've had her checked for Cushing's, but if she does grow a really long coat in winter, that's often a sign of Cushing's. And look, I would be thinking that is too much, and it's just see, like if you put them on her, and if you're only putting them on at night time, go out just before bed, pop your hands under there, and if you notice that she's sweating or she feels too hot, so you can really feel that she's roasty, toasty, warm, higher than your temperature, then I think that would be too much. If you stable her, I would probably just be putting the fleece on her. Yeah, but I think that you might be overdoing it, but just see how hot she is once she's had them on for a few hours. She'll soon tell you whether she gets very cold. Yeah, okay. So I mean, if she is, as they get older, they can't thermoregulate. So they, and if you're stabling her, she can't sort of walk around and keep warm. So they often just stand and stay stagnant and can get cold. So it certainly could be enough for her, because they just can't, it takes so much energy to keep warm. Keeping her that warm might be what she needs, but just see how warm she is underneath the rugs in a few positions. Don't just go, under the belly or, up the belly or anything. Go, around the flank, up the shoulder, and over the wither area if you can get your hand up that far. And just make sure she's not too hot, she's not sweating. But yeah, they certainly often can't create enough energy to keep warm, and being that age and potentially Cushingoid, is she may need that extra warmth. So it's really hard. You need to monitor the horse, and they'll soon, if you feel that they're sweating and starting to get too warm, then yes, it is too much for her. So yeah. Okay, I don't seem to have any more questions there. So I just wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight, and it is with a heavy heart I'm taking 12-month leave. I have thoroughly enjoyed presenting the webinars and white papers. So I will get everything sorted and be back on here, but please don't hesitate to send questions, photos, anything on Facebook, and always pop in your number too. I'm more than happy to phone you rather than have Facebook conversations. Sometimes it's easier to call, but I'm certainly here for the next 12 months for any concerns, questions, anything like that. Stay in contact, and I will definitely be here to help you out. So thanks everyone for joining, and I will certainly be in touch. Thanks all. Bye.